Hey everybody, how you doing? Bill Colarulo, joined today by employment attorney Domingo. We wanted to talk today, even though it's 2020 and these things should not be a problem, they still are. Sexual harassment in a lot of workplaces. Erica is an employment attorney. She's handled numerous cases over the years dealing with sexual harassment. So we wanted to bring her on to talk a little bit about it and ways that we can prevent that in the workforce. So Erica, a lot of people are familiar with the words sexual harassment, but in the legal context, what exactly is sexual harassment?
Sexual harassment is any unwanted physical or verbal contact in the workplace that relates to someone's sex or sexual orientation. Some examples include comments about someone's physical appearance or comments that are of a sexual nature, as well as unwanted touching or gesturing in the workplace.
So give us some examples of what sexual harassment can look like in the workplace.
So the typical thing that people think of when they think of sexual harassment is a man coming onto a woman, making sexual advances towards her in the workplace, commenting on her physical appearance. But it can also be women making sexual comments to men, and it can also be male on male or female on female. And the person doesn't have to be homosexual for a male on male comment to be considered sexual harassment.
Now, Erica, in today's world, the more knowledgeable we become, the more we're understanding that not everyone identifies with a gender of male or female. How does that apply to sexual harassment in the workplace?
So statistically, we don't see that in the cases that are brought in court, Bill, but what we're seeing more and more is that those individuals are, in fact, subject to sexual harassment at the same or greater rates, but they are more afraid to come forward because of their positions in the workplace, because of the power dynamics and their lack of power, or the fact that they really need to keep their jobs and they're concerned about retaliation.
So does sexual harassment in the workplace tend to affect the more marginalized populations, such as the LGBTQ plus community, more so than others?
It does. We're starting to see more that power dynamics in the workplace and those typically marginalized individuals, including minorities and the LGBTQ community, all face sexual harassment to the same or maybe more than the typical communities you might see, or male on female sexual harassment that you might see. But they don't tend to come forward as much because they're not in positions of power.
And all of these categories, gender, sexual orientation, race, is all protected under the New Jersey statutes, correct?
Correct. The New Jersey Law Against Discrimination, or LAD, protects a variety of protected classes.
So Erica, in your experience in handling these types of claims over the years, what type of impact does sexual harassment have on the victims?
It can have a couple different impacts, Bill. The first one being an emotional or mental health impact. A lot of victims suffer from psychological damage as a result of facing sexual harassment in the workplace. But then there's also more tangential things, such as changes in their compensation, or being demoted, or even being terminated if they speak out about it. So there's a real risk for victims of sexual harassment to come forward about it, but it's important that they do so.
Someone who feels they were a victim of sexual harassment in the workplace, what power do they have? What recourse do they have?
Employees can always take steps within the workplace and outside the workplace. The first thing they can do is report it to HR, report to management what's going on. If they don't get recourse through that, if they don't see that the workplace is changing or the sexual harassment is ending, they can also move forward and file a lawsuit if they want. Civil courts allow you to bring a claim for sexual harassment even if you're still working at the job.
So for a victim to file a lawsuit, usually they're going to want to hire an attorney. How do they afford to hire an attorney to represent them in a case like this?
A lot of these cases we take on a contingent fee basis, which means that we don't take any money from the client until we get a recovery for them. There's no money out of their pocket in bringing this case forward. It's a great way to equalize the system when you're going against a bigger employer, to make sure these employees have representation and are protected and their rights are protected.
Yeah, the contingency fee laws in New Jersey and in a lot of states are great for that very reason. It is the great equalizer. It allows even an everyday person to hire an attorney that has experience and resources to be able to take on these big companies and big corporations. So that's great. So employment cases fall into that category as well. So when a victim of sexual harassment makes that difficult decision to come forward and hire an attorney to file a civil lawsuit, what can they expect with regard to that litigation?
Bill, it's not a quick process by any means. We go through a slow vetting process to make sure we understand the claims, we have information we need to ensure that the claim can be supported and is sustainable in court. And then once we file the lawsuit, there will be a process where the plaintiff may feel re-victimized because they're going to be deposed and asked questions about what happened to them, and that may re-traumatize them to a certain extent going through that process. But I always find that's an important step in healing and getting through the harassment that occurred.
And if a victim hires an attorney and the employer retaliates against that victim simply for hiring an attorney, is that something that they're allowed to do?
It depends, because just hiring an attorney, how do they know they hired an attorney? If the attorney sends a letter or some correspondence alleging that sexual harassment has occurred and then the employee is terminated, then arguably there is a claim for retaliation for bringing forth complaints of sexual harassment in the workplace.
So we just talked about what the victims can do if they feel they've been sexually harassed. What can other employees do, their coworkers, to prevent this from happening in the workplace?
I always encourage anyone who witnesses sexual harassment in the workplace to come forward. And that's for two reasons. One, it brings validity to the complainant's complaint, the individual who is the victim. They now have someone backing them up. So it's not just a he said, she said. There's more support for the victim. But also, an individual who reports or complains about sexual harassment, even if it doesn't affect them personally, is protected under the New Jersey law against discrimination. So the employer cannot retaliate against them if they come forward on behalf of the victim.
So if a coworker comes forward because they've witnessed sexual harassment and they are retaliated against by the employer, what recourse do they have?
That individual can bring their own complaint for retaliation under the New Jersey law against discrimination. They are also protected under that law.
And they would be entitled to damages, civil damages?
Same kind of civil damages for any emotional distress they suffered, and also for their lost wages as a result of being terminated, demoted, whatever the adverse employment action is.
And when you said earlier that these coworkers should come forward, who should they report this to?
They should report it to HR or management the same way the employee who's the victim is reporting it. But if they are in contact with the victim and the victim has an attorney, they could also come forward to that attorney and provide a statement in that regard as well.
So a victim of sexual harassment, obviously that's a very overwhelming situation. If they do have to hire a lawyer, they do have to bring a lawsuit. In your experience, what type of differences has this made in their lives going forward?
I find that when somebody comes forward and they pursue these claims of sexual harassment, it helps them take the power back. There's such a power dynamic in a sexual harassment case between the harasser and the victim. And when we can help those victims get their power back, you think about what happened with Harvey Weinstein. One woman came forward with the allegations against him, and then another, and then another. And all of those victims helped elevate each other's voices to help them feel not only that they were not alone, but that they were in control of the situation from that point moving forward, and they could control the narrative. And that's what I love to be able to help victims of sexual harassment do, is control the narrative and move their story forward in a way that they get their justice at the end.
Erica, thank you so much for your time and for this information. It's so important for everyone out there to understand what their rights are as victims and also what their rights are as coworkers who may observe this type of behavior in the workplace. Viewers, thank you for watching. We think it's important to get this information out there so you guys understand your rights. If you want to learn more, be sure to follow along whatever pages you're watching, and we're going to keep the information coming. At Domingo Colarulo, if we can help, we will.